Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about a short story because it is Short Story Tuesday. Looking for an author that I haven't really talked about before and who was new to me. And today's short story is all about a shy woman who runs into a number of problems that stem from her anxiety. I am referring to The Mouse by Anais Nin, which was published in her short story collection book Under a Glass Bell, which was published in 1944. For those who don't know, Anais Nin, which isn't actually her full name, she has like a very elaborate first name, possibly due to her French-Cuban history. She is a multiracial individual. And she's known for writing primarily diaries. Like, she wrote diaries and then she had them published, which revealed quite a bit about herself and her escapades. In particular, she wrote erotic kind of things, talked about her sexual encounters and her relationships, or as much as her husband would let her talk about her relationship. And so you see that in her diaries. She wrote about the taboo quite frequently, including incest, indicating that she might have had incestuous relationships, which is in any time period would have been a bit of a scandal. And she also wrote short stories, and she also wrote nonfiction as well, talking about the future of writing, or doing like sort of a biography about, or an analysis on D.H. Lawrence, of all people. So very interesting kind of writer, well regarded for her writings as well as her forays into erotic literature. I hadn't really encountered her before now, and I am a bit happy. I might read some more of her work in the future, but for now, I'm fine with just talking about this particular short story. And so without further ado, let's talk about The Mouse. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So The Mouse focuses on an unnamed narrator who is a rich woman, I believe. The Mouse constantly refers to this woman as Madame, so that would indicate, that the narrator is a woman there. And they are, this rich woman narrator is living with a young girl or young woman who she refers to as the Mouse, very shy, very reserved, and they are living on a houseboat on the Seine River in France, somewhere near Notre Dame. The extent of their relationship is a bit unclear. Two women living with one another, given we're talking about Anais Nin, it could be a gay relationship, or it could just be a relationship between a woman and her servant, which seems to actually be going on there. The narrator notes that the mouse has quite a few fears, a lot of anxiety going on, just very cautious about the world, finding it very difficult to live within it, and just not really having a good time, even though they're supposed to be relaxing on this houseboat. They eat a lot of eggs and meat, but when the narrator begins running low on funds, the mouse gets upset because there won't be any more meat. It seems like she'll have to go without, which again seems to be something related to her childhood. The narrator then leaves for a week, presumably to get more money or something like that, and the mouse is all alone. They do have a moment of joy where they're like someone's hat falls into the water, and they go and get the hat with a broom, but they almost fall in themselves. And as the narrator notes, like the mouse laughs at that point, but they're shocked by their own laughter, and so they become more inward and more isolated as a result of that. And when the narrator does return, the narrator learns all of this from the mouse, but they also start to see that the mouse is sick. And then the mouse talks about how she invited her boyfriend over while the narrator was gone because she was worried and scared of all the unfamiliar people in this area, and so she invited her boyfriend over. They had sex, and it turns out she got pregnant, and she didn't want to have a child, so she relied on a chemical solution to abort babies at this time, which resulted in the abortion, but also gave her an infection, as a doctor who comes by says that. And so the doctor helps her get rid of the baby fully, but there's still an issue with a fever and infection, and things don't seem to be going well for the mouse in this case. As the story comes to a close, the narrator takes the mouse to a hospital, but they begin asking her tons of questions unrelated to her illness at this point, asking her where she worked before and where she worked before that. And the narrator is taken aback by all of this. And as the story comes to a close, the narrator wonders if the mouse is even going to get help, as it appears that she's going to die at this point. So it's not really that big of a happy ending there. In terms of analysis, there's a little bit to talk about here. With the mouse, one of the things that Nin is talking about is anxiety, specifically the mouse's anxiety, what she's feeling and where this all might be coming from. Because her anxiety seems to envelop her, it envelops her whole being. She can't relax. It's hard for her to enjoy anything, and even the smallest noise causes fear within her. Allow me to read you an interesting quote from this. If she was seen coming out of her cabin, she immediately concealed what she was carrying as if she were thieving. No gentleness could cross the border of the mouse's fear, which was ingrained in the very skin of her thin legs. Her shoulders sloped as if too heavily burdened. Every sound was an alarm to her ear. And I think that's a really good example, a good description of general anxiety disorder. I have a background in psychology, so I know a little bit about that. But it's clear that the mouse is not having a good time at all. Where exactly does this come from, I think is a good question. And in the story, Anais Nin talks about how the mouse had a strict childhood. They were expected to behave a certain way. They can only eat certain foods. And living in that kind of life would make things a little bit more stressful. And on top of that, it seems there's a bit of money worries too, whether it be because she had a specific upbringing and having no money is difficult for her, or she could have just had a strict upbringing and no money in that family. And so it's just a reminder of all the struggles she had to go through to even survive and get out of that type of situation. And then there's a bit of social anxiety there as well. Anytime she's around other people, she gets really nervous and she gets unsure of what to do next. It's a very troubling situation for her to be in. Every situation, it seems like, just not a good time. And there are a lot of people with anxiety out there who could probably tell you that it's an unhappy time being in your own skin, because you can't shake that just overarching fear that hangs around you at every corner. Now, is there hope for the mouse in this situation? And I would think that maybe there is, because you could easily get help, or you could, if you're around enough supportive people, those general anxieties might wash away. They might fade away over time. But maybe Anais Nin is saying it's too late. She grew up in that environment, and her present behavior is a reflection of that environment that she grew up in, and it's too late. You can't change how she's been programmed. And so it requires deprogramming, which you can do via therapy. However, the therapies that would probably help a woman like the mouse wouldn't be invented for years later, unfortunately. So at this present state, this woman is kind of stuck in this pattern of helplessness and fear until she kind of just dies. There are feminist elements to the story too that Anais is trying to get at. She's trying to point out the social expectations for women and how disastrous and unhealthy they can be for those women, and kind of reflecting the time time period in which this exists. Like this woman, this is taking place in the 1940s, presumably, or shortly before that. And so the women of the time, like they had a lot of responsibilities. This is not very far removed from the expectations of the Victorian era, so it's a very difficult time for women in that period as well. They would be expected to marry like not for love, but because of social status and whatnot. They would be expected to be finished ladies, perfect in every single way, and they often wouldn't be allowed to think for themselves. Any sign of individuality would be punished. I talked a little bit about that in John Williams's Stoner, particularly the woman that William Stoner marries in that story is not having a good time. And so you see all of that reflected on the mouse. Like, she's shy because women cannot be bold. She's shy because she's been constantly told that women can't be a certain way, that they have to be shy, held back, and that's created a little bit of anxiety within her because maybe she strives to be different. And so there's that war in her own mind. Of course, as interesting and as fitting as that description is for the mouse, it doesn't really explain the narrator, because the narrator seems very free. She seems very liberated in a number of ways, very willing to stand by the mouse, even though she's going through all of this. And even after she hears that she got an abortion, she chooses to stick by her. So a sense of liberation there. But why is the narrator like this, but the mouse isn't? Did the narrator have a better upbringing because of their money? It might be that's the case, but I do feel like there's a discrepancy there that isn't fully explained. But Anais Nin might be trying to talk about class and money there, which is important. And then related to all of this is the sort of sin of abortion in the story. The abortion as a sin of control, rather, because when the mouse tries to take control of her own life in the form of an abortion, because she gets pregnant and she decides, I don't want this baby, like, she gets sick, and then the doctors punish her. They ask her a bunch of questions that they don't really need to ask, and they make it seem like they're not actually going to try to help her when it appears that she's in a dire state. So the moment that the mouse tries to claim something for herself, tries to take control over her own life, she's punished for it. And I do think that's a fascinating element to this story. And I think it's clear that Anais Nin is trying to touch upon some of the patriarchy or some of the misogyny that exists during this time. There's really just one problem with the story, and I do feel that it's too short. We don't learn too much about the narrator in this story, which I feel could have been helpful in offering comparisons between the narrator and the mouse. And explaining a little bit more could have been helpful as well, as I feel sometimes this story can be a bit vague. So the biggest problem is that it's too short and that it could have been fleshed out upon. And I don't feel like it would have taken away too much from any of the other elements in this story. Anyway, those are my thoughts on The Mouse by Anais Nin. It's a fine short story. I wouldn't recommend going out and buying the book, but maybe trying to find it online. I will link to it in the description so that you can go find it and read it. Probably not one of the better short stories that I read, but still an interesting one from an author that you might not have heard about. If you have any thoughts on it, or if you want to comment on my review, do so below. Let's have a discussion about this. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that other people can find out about this short story or this author if they don't already know. Also, join the Discord if you want to talk more about books or movies or just general media of some sort. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and very shy and reserved travels. Farewell.